why still things are going quite slow in diabetes is that we have a pretty good way to treat the symptoms, right? Insulin is treating the consequences of the disease, but not its cause, right? So as a medical student, I was completely frustrated. I thought, but this is you dealing with the symptoms. How does it start? And the professor looked at me like, are you mad? Look how well this is going with new technologies, pumps and sensors, and not everybody has access to this, to put it mildly, right? It's still not good enough. And I think that my mission in my life has been to offer therapies that treat the cause of the disease, not only the consequences. And that's what we need to do. And that's where we now, at the dawn of a completely new chapter in diabetes care, is where we actually start to treat its cause. Am I satisfied? That's another question. No, of course not. Although we have already cured some people, which is amazing, because some people say diabetes cannot be cured. And in rare cases that can be done, the more important question is to ask is whom to treat, when, and how. That's not easy, right?
Welcome to Global Diabetes Insights, your go-to podcast for navigating the world of diabetes. I am Tino, a certified diabetes educator and a global advocate for non-communicable diseases.
And I'm Kona, a global advocate and a medical doctor. Together, we're your hosts, dedicated to raising awareness, fostering open discussions, and creating a safe space for everyone affected by diabetes.
Join us as we dive into empowering conversations with individuals living with diabetes, caregivers, healthcare professionals, and researchers. Our goal is to not only guide you through effective diabetes management, but also to inspire advocacy for proper healthcare access.
So get ready for a journey of insights, ideas, and diverse perspectives. Let's amplify our collective voice and create positive change. Get involved, get engaged, and join us in creating the change we need. So welcome everybody to Global Diabetes Insights.
Right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Global Diabetes Insights. And I'm Tino here, your host. And today we have the honor of delving into the fascinating world of diabetes research with a distinguished guest. Our guest today is not only a professor of medicine, but also holds prestigious roles in diabetology, immunology, and intervention. So please join me in welcoming the brilliant mind behind groundbreaking research at Leiden University Medical Center in the Netherlands, Professor Bart Rooijp. So please, if you could kindly introduce yourself to the audience, I think that would be great. Over to you, Professor.
I'm not sure I can do a better introduction than you just did, Tirutendo. As you said, I devote my career to cure diabetes ever since I was at medical school, and maybe even shortly before that. So everything I do, everything I think about during the day, at night, has diabetes type 1 as a kind of a default, which is kind of troublesome sometimes, but it is what it is. I've been working on my mission for more than 30 years, and I can't wait to finish it before I retire. And I promise I won't retire before I do. But
if you could briefly describe what it means to be a professor of diabetology, immunopathology, and intervention.
Well, it means that I have been tasked really by the king, technically, to study the causes of diabetes, all the aspects that associate with the disease, and to really understand the processes that lead to the destruction of the source of insulin in our body. And with that knowledge, and that's the most important part, design new strategies that help you to preserve that source of insulin, to stop disease progression, and hopefully even to reverse disease. And the latter, that's what we call a cure.
I think already you have opened a great insight on things that I'm going to follow up asking more about the destruction of the beta cells. Mostly people understand only to say, I think it's the problem of the immune system. Now that you're an expert in this, I think we're going to enjoy more, learning more from you, like not just for people living with diabetes, but also healthcare professionals and research.
Absolutely.
My next question would be, with the level at which diabetes is perceived, and there are still debates over the causes of type 1 diabetes, kindly shed more light over the role of the immune system and the beta cells.
Yeah, that has been a very interesting journey, to be quite honest, because I used to say that type 1 diabetes is the result of a mistake of the immune system, where the immune system that normally is defending us from infections, from cancer, is actually turning against some of your own tissues. And this is what we call an autoimmune disease. And as a consequence, that tissue can be destroyed. And there are examples like rheumatoid arthritis, multiple sclerosis, but also type 1 diabetes. And in case of type 1 diabetes, very curiously, only one special type of cells, and we only have a few million of those in our body that are clustered in what we call islets of Langerhans in the pancreas. That's the only target of the immune system, which just reminds us how sophisticated our immune system is and how educated and how carefully it can discriminate between what is from the outside and what is from yourself. So it's an extremely subtle abnormality. Within those islets of Langerhans, there are actually other cells that make other hormones, and they seem untouched by this process. So it's quite stunning how specific this is. So I used to say it's a mistake of the immune system, but I changed my mind only recently to believe that it's actually not the immune system, but the beta cells that are making mistakes. And that in fact, the immune system is responding with good intentions. It is actually targeting attention to a tissue that cries out for help because it's in distress. And it's the same cries for help that you see in cancer, where cancers evoke immune responses to destroy the cancer, or viruses do the same thing. So I actually now contend that diabetes is not a mistake of the immune system. It's beta cells that are making mistakes once they get in stress, and that can activate and provoke the immune system to respond. Still, the immune system is responsible for the destruction of the pancreatic beta cells, right? So it's still an autoimmune disease, but I try not to blame it. And in fact, I won't blame the beta cells either, because they are the hardest working friends we have in our bodies. You know, one single beta cell can produce 1 million insulin molecules every minute. Can you imagine? 1 million, one cell, 1 minute. It's no wonder that cell gets stressed.
Wow.
Right? So I won't blame the beta cells either, but it gives a completely new insight in what we believe is happening when beta cells are destroyed, and that you can very quickly translate to therapies, because it explains, for example, why some of the immunotherapies that we tried, that we took from other autoimmune diseases, rheumatoid arthritis or other diseases, why they didn't work, why they did not have a lasting effect, a durable effect in people with type 1 diabetes. And that means that because if it is also a beta cell problem, we should also treat the beta cells. And I honestly believe that the immune system is not interested in happy tissue. So if we can make beta cells happy again by beta cell therapy, maybe immunotherapy is even less of a necessity. So that is kind of the bigger picture. We learned so many other things. I'm not sure you want me to go into this, but for example, I was taught at medical school it's a children's disease, which is not true. The majority of new diagnoses is in adults. People 30 years or older is half of the patients that are diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. It becomes more difficult to diagnose because it starts to overlap with type 2 diabetes, which is more of a lifestyle disease. There are immune features in there, but it's more how insulin functions that is disturbed in that disease. Type 1, clearly a shortage of insulin, and because the source is being destroyed. So it has an autoimmune component. Now, I was also told that diabetes is an inherited disease, and I hate that because it gives parents of people with diabetes a stigma. Now I have become aware that the gene variants that increase your risk to diabetes, those are the winners of the Middle Ages. They endorse you with the best immune system in the world. So thumbs up for people with diabetes and their parents, because these are the ones that help all the plagues. COVID was a huge problem for type 2 diabetic patients, but not for type 1. They have a fantastic immune system. That's an important thing. In fact, I will push it a little further if you don't mind. People with cancer are craving the risk genes of diabetic patients because people with cancer lack this type of immune response against the cancer tissue, which is also your own tissue. So some cancers actually are less often occurring in people with type 1 diabetes because of that highly sensitive immune system. So I just want to congratulate people that are suffering from this very bad disease, type 1 diabetes, that there could be some blessings in disguise, and that they actually have best immune defense for the next COVID or pandemic that comes around to be prepared. So good for you.
Wow. I don't know. You've shared a lot. You've shared a
Yeah,
lot.
I know. Once you push the button, then I
Yeah.
stop talking. No, but it comes from a frustration that the blame game, whose fault is it? And I just cannot live with that. I cannot imagine that our body does things just because it goes in rebellion, right? I mean, I cannot believe that. I'm happy to say that gut feeling proved to be right. It probably is more subtle than this and also more complicated. We also learned something else, though, that I think is important. We learned two things that are critically important to those that are living with this disease. And one is that the disease is actually very diverse. We should have listened closer to the patients because we could have known much sooner, because they always were complaining that what they were reading, in diabetes magazines or what they heard on other podcasts than yours, they could not relate to this because it didn't feel like them. And they were right. The disease is diverse. And that means, by the way, that we should not expect a magic bullet. We should not expect one intervention that will cure everybody. And that's important because we have had maybe way too high expectations. I just spent a couple of years in California to work in a cancer institute, basically to learn from cancer what we should not do in diabetes. Cancer is the opposite. Cancer is not enough immune response. Diabetes is too much of it. So I went there to understand, and cancer is all about precision medicine, about immunotherapy. What I also learned there is that they are drumming the drums and ringing the bells if 12% of the melanoma patients is in remission. And in diabetes, we would say 88% had no effect. It failed in 88%, but it's same result, right? So I think we should count our blessings and we should look at those individual patients to understand why they had a benefit and why they sometimes are cured and others are not. And in that way, move forward, as people in cancer did, to find the right drug for the right patient at the right time in their disease. So these are really changing, moving targets. And I'm really, really excited that with this new knowledge, we have a much better handle to treat people and a much better understanding why it doesn't work in everybody, because we're different. And we should embrace diversity, but we should also then be prepared for precision medicine or personalized medicines to find the right interventions for the right people. So that makes it a little bit more challenging, but at least we can be proud of the successes that we already have had in some rare cases. You can always argue it's only one case, but if it's you, or if it's your child, or your spouse, or your parents, I mean, the world changes. Diabetes is not just a disease of a patient, but the whole environment is affected by this. So I think it's important to really appreciate this and to count our blessings.
I could just even stop the recording and then, hey, I'll just post this, like even this one response could do. People appreciate, really. This is so great. Thank you so much for these insights that people usually, we might not even get the opportunity to get these insights when we come to see the doctor in the room. You're just being told things that...
But to be quite honest, Tino, in all fairness, the treating physicians and more importantly, my real heroes, the diabetes nurses, they can barely keep up with all these spectacular changes. I mean, things have been so much different, as I said, as when I was studying medicine. It's understandable. So we need to educate each other, our peers, the regulators, the lawmakers, the pharma needs to be educated, and care providers. So there is a lot to do there. But I mean, I cannot wait doing this, and one of the things you and I are doing right now is just that, to really give people a new insight in where we are and what opportunities this is providing to us, and join forces to serve more people.
Wow, this is so great. I had follow-ups, but I think you even like touched on like deeply with an understanding that you have, but also the experience and the years you've heard, like working in this, like, I mean, for 30 years now, because usually for most people that we've seen, most people that we hear from are the endocrinologists that are just working, trying to understand these, but also now you're working on another spectrum, trying to understand the immunotherapies, the medications that people use, what it means to them, and how best you can try to invent. The progress has been made.
You say something really important there also. You just mentioned a couple of disciplines that are involved in treating patients, understanding disease. It's endocrinology, it's immunology, it's microbiology, it's pathology, it's genetics. So the only way to be able to connect all these dots is to switch teams now and then and understand, talk to others. So I've become, as an immunologist, much more interested in how beta cells function. And only when I got to understand all these changes that happened, I understood that there is a role for beta cells in their own demise. So you need to really have a multidisciplinary look at this to comprehend what's going on. And to spread this news, we even need more different entities, diabetes nurses, platforms like yours, caretakers, pharma, everybody. It is actually holding us back a little bit now that the regulators, FDA or in America or EMA in Europe, who decide which medications we can test or even allow on the market, if they don't know what you and I know now, they are not able to set the right targets. Because I also believe that there is much more to gain than curing type 1 diabetes. I think that if we can prevent complications, that is actually a much lower bar. That's low-hanging fruit, I would argue. Preventing hypoglycemia, preventing the disease to progress. Because the other thing that we know, which is critically important, is that many patients still have beta cells, even if they don't make insulin anymore. Those beta cells are, by the way, the cells that are making the insulin in the pancreatic islet. And those beta cells, they kind of hibernate. That's the word I use to explain that. You could maybe speculate they're hiding for the immune attack, but they are there. And that's important because that means that you may not always need to get novel sources of beta cells, which is of course very complicated and expensive. If we can reactivate your own beta cells that were asleep, kissing away the sleeping beauties, the prince on the white horse, whatever you call it, that will be a much better way to do it. Except you should only do this once you keep the immune system in check, right? You don't want to call beta cells out of hiding and the lion is still waiting there to consume the prey. So we have to close the tap. We have to stop the problem and then we can start mopping. And that is where I think you need to combine immunotherapy to stop the immune attack and beta cell therapy to make beta cells happy again and prevent their provoking the immune system.
No, I don't know what to say. Now we have a lot and lot of medications like immunotherapies. We have drugs that can be used to treat the condition. And we also have drugs that are coming into the market, drugs that can delay the onset of diabetes. But really, it's not really sort of solving the issue, the problem that we have. If we just delay, but we know like maybe in the next 5 years' time, this person might have diabetes. So it's also expensive. So I think we need to put more focus on things that really matter, to trying to make the beta cells happy again. But I don't know why billions of the cells that which the beta cell is making, for it to get stressed, like billions, this is just too much. Do you think, with your knowledge, understanding that the beta cell is making a number of copies into the body, making them stressed, do you think every part of it is being used efficiently in the body if there are millions of them being made? Or maybe there could be a way to delay, maybe to reduce the amount that the beta cell might have to produce in the body?
If I understand your question correct, what you're saying is right. If we reduce stress of the beta cells, for the record, this is different stress than doing your exams, getting your driver's license, stuff like that. This is what we call metabolic stress. If you can reduce that, that would take away the burden and that would avoid beta cells of making mistakes and produce what we call neoantigens, new proteins that the immune system has never been seen before and believes it might be pathogenic or a cancer, right? So if you can avoid those mistakes from happening, that would help. And you can do that in different ways. Certainly having more beta cells is one way of doing it. So the sooner that we can protect and preserve beta cells, we're also able to preserve their function and have the remaining cells being less stressed. But there are many drugs already on the market in type 2 diabetes that some of their function actually reduce the stress. If you make sure that the insulin works better with metformin, which is a simple, cheap medication, 5 cents per pill, I believe, then your beta cells also need to work and be less stressed. And I fear that even lifestyle might be another factor that you could do to help your beta cells to do better. And in that context, I'm not sure that you were planning to bring this in, but the microbiome, our friends in our guts, they might play a role in this whole process as well. And as you know, it's not what we eat, but it's what our microbiome, all the bacteria in our intestines are making from what we eat, that keeps us alive. And it turns out that the composition of your microbiome is critically important in maintaining health. Disturbances in there or changes, they can actually be deleterious. And that's not just diabetes, it's cancer, it's allergies. This applies basically to any health issue. The gut microbiome is probably going to be playing an important role, which is not surprising because, our gut is the largest immune organ we have. And at any given time, half of our immune cells are in the gut. I mean, it's not strange. But for example, things like gluten, a component in wheat, that is very difficult for the microbiome to process and digest. And what happens is that the bacteria that you need to digest gluten, they push out other bacteria that are producing metabolites, small substances, let's call it small vitamins, that will keep us alive. So lifestyle includes making your microbiome happy. One way of doing this is not taking too much gluten, or there's different ways of modulating this, but it actually means that even with lifestyle, you can help your body to be set in the health mode and be sure that you can also make beta cells happy again. I think happy beta cells strongly relate to a happy gut and a happy immune system. It's a menage a trois. They're all communicating with each other. So you cannot just hit on one piece, which is what we do until today. You have to look at it at a more holistic way. Curiously, in cancer, sometimes immunotherapy doesn't work in cancer. Then we do what we call a poop transplantation. So we transplant the fecal microbiome of a healthy donor to the cancer patient, and then suddenly the immunotherapy works again. It's amazing how subtle this sometimes can be. I would not say that the poop transplantation is subtle. I think that's a major intervention. But with my friends in Amsterdam, Max Nieuwdorp and friends, we're trying to see which bacteria were in there, and maybe even better, what those bacteria because we also did poop transplantations in diabetes, and lo and behold, you stop disease progression for the full year and still counting. So now we kind of can tease out what were the bacteria, and then what are they making, and what they make, you can put in a pill. And that way you need not necessarily change the microbiome and still have the benefit of a healthy gut. And a healthy gut means a healthy immune system, and a healthy immune system means less stressed beta cells. Let's not forget that the pancreas, which is the strange organ where all these insulin-producing islets are lying, is a gut organ. It's actually 99% of the pancreas is actually busy making digestive enzymes. So it is actually part of your intestinal system. It just shows how many parts of our body interact, and it would add to the complexity perhaps, but it also creates more opportunities to get things in balance again, right? So I'm not pessimistic. I'm just happy that we know this now and we can build upon that.
Beautiful. I think I like one point, like where you mentioned that it's not about what we eat, but maybe like what is made from what we eat. And there are other components that we eat that might be difficult, because now I know like there are people with celiac disease, they complain more to say, if I eat something with gluten, I would suffer a lot. So I think if we are mindful of those kind of things with enough awareness, I think that would be great. And I think, thank you so much for this insight. I think it will help people.
But we tend to think about bacteria as our enemies or even parasites, but it's actually interesting to know that certain parasites, like pinworms in our gut, they distract your immune system, so you have less chance to get type 1 diabetes. There are wonderful examples, even in the Cold War, when Eastern Germany was kind of separated from West Germany with the Iron Curtain. The healthcare was slightly different in the East as it was in the West. 96% of pupils at school, the children, they had pinworm, and I think 20% of their teachers also. But there was much less type 1 diabetes. Now then the Iron Wall came down, Germany reunited, and we were all happy again. So you take a pill to get rid of the pinworm, and then suddenly diabetes goes up again. So you should even embrace our little friends in our bodies that help your immune system to stay in balance. This is what people call the hygiene hypothesis. And a busy immune system is less likely to get distracted and start attacking your own cells, doing stuff that it's meant to do. And many people believe that's one of the explanations why type 1 diabetes in places in the world like Africa are taking less victims, because the immune system is super active and in very good shape to deal with things and keeps itself in check, which reduces the risk to get inflammation and autoimmune diseases.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that, and also trying to upload things in Africa. So if people can understand and get this insight, like while you're saying it, I think people will be mindful, or you'd maybe open their minds, because now people are trying to modernize things. They're trying to eat food that are eaten in the Western countries, and not understanding like why we are having a rise in the tide of diseases that are coming in. It is said over 60% of people in Africa, they have diabetes, but they are not aware of that because they don't have the equipment. We don't have the necessities that will maybe help us to see like what is happening. People don't to go to the hospitals because they feel many diseases might be diagnosed, so they're worried more. I'm going to take care of myself, that kind of thing. So, Professor, in your mission to understand the cause of type 1 diabetes in humans and in translating the knowledge into innovative strategies for the immune intervention therapy, aiming at a cure for type 1 diabetes, which are so much invested everything into. So like, what has been your biggest learning point, and are you happy with the progress that has been made thus far?
I must admit that I am very grateful for the progress that we have made, and I am surprised to some extent. I used to be a pessimist. I turned out to be an optimist nowadays. Normally in life it's the opposite direction. Children are very optimistic and older people are all very pessimistic, but in this case it's the opposite. Now I think it's important to understand why things went so slow, right? Part of the reason is we didn't know it all. So we had to go back to the bench and understand what was going on. Another reason why still things are going quite slow in diabetes is that we have a pretty good way to treat the symptoms, right? Insulin is treating the consequences of the disease, but not its cause, right? So as a medical student, I was completely frustrated. I thought, but this is you dealing with the symptoms. How does it start? And the professor looked at me like, are you mad? Look how well this is going with new technologies, pumps and sensors, and not everybody has access to this, to put it mildly. Right? It's still not good enough. And I think that my mission in my life has been to offer therapies that treat the cause of the disease, not only the consequences. And that's what we need to do. And that's where we now, at the dawn of a completely new chapter in diabetes care, is where we actually start to treat its cause. Am I satisfied? That's another question. No, of course not. Although we have already cured some people, which is amazing, because some people say diabetes cannot be cured. And in rare cases that can be done. The more important question is to ask is whom to treat, when, and how. That's not easy, right? That is 3 variables, which is an equation that's very difficult to solve. I'm also unhappy, to be quite honest with you, that we are not taking full advantage of the diversity that we have in the world to understand the disease better. And I was pretty angry when I saw a genetic risk score that was proposed by some of my friends to diagnose type 1 diabetes and to distinguish it from type 2 diabetes, because it failed completely in people of African descent. And that a rude reminder that we're still so much biased on one of the endotypes of the disease that is most often occurring, in particular Northwest European descent. And we don't know enough about disease in other parts of the world. And that is a shame, because there are rare variations of genes that do not exist in Europe. So we will never know, but they do exist in Africa that pointed to very specific pathways that helped us understand how beta cells can work. And everybody will benefit, regardless of what genes you have. You see, so I think that people are now much more prepared to be a little bit more open-minded and open in the inclusion of whom they want to treat, because we can then learn why it works when it works and why it doesn't work when it fails, and that way get the right drugs for the right people at the right time. So Am I satisfied? No, but I'm counting my blessings with all the steps we've made and the fact that we are now so close to offer something meaningful to so many more patients. And when I say this, in terms of meaningful, I don't just mean complete cure, because that is still going to be a high bar. It can be done, it has happened, but it's too difficult. I also mean preventing complications, preventing hyperglycemia, improving the quality of life, things that don't require fancy stuff like stem cell therapy and closed loops and stuff like that. If we can help anybody to keep some of their beta cells working, the probability that they get complications is almost nil, right? And this is something we should offer to everybody, wherever they are in the world. That's part of my mission as well, to see how we can stop progression and then have your own body improve your quality of life.
This means a lot, because first thing, if you want to solve the problem, if you want to find a solution for a problem, you first need to understand the problem, how it starts, so that you know what really is missing, what can we change, invention why. Well, this is so great. So thank you so much for your focus and for the progress that you've made, because you're part of it. I think we would celebrate more like by hearing you saying that you're not satisfied. That means you stay hungry and you're not about to forget. You still need to wrestle.
And I have something else in common with patients, and that's what we call a sense of urgency, right? Let's do it quicker. I mean, I'm probably almost as impatient as most of the watchers and listeners that suffer from diabetes. It's so slow, and I want it to go faster. I realize we have to make careful steps, because if we make mistakes, we can be thrown back 10 years, right? So we want to do things carefully, but let's please move on more quickly and offer interventions to more people at affordable prices. Those are the things that I want to spend the rest of my career doing. And I'm only halfway, right?
Well, we can't wait. I think we'll be following up on it. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing and your role. With everything you're doing, we learned that you discovered the role of the T cells in diabetes, which led you to focus on defining the human cellular immune responses, the autoantigen identification, and islet transplantation, and so many other things that you're doing. It's pretty fascinating. Some of them we might not even be able to understand them as it is, but so we would appreciate you explaining like what this means to people living with diabetes.
Sometimes it's not rocket science. As somebody at Congress in the US said, it's actually more complicated than rocket science. But you asked me earlier, Tino, what can you do to reduce stress? And the beauty is, that's exactly what people are doing every single day when they inject themselves with insulin. Because if you keep your blood sugars good, it's not just preventing potential complications 30 years from now. No, it's actually making the remaining beta cells that you might also have happy and reduce the stress of those cells. So already you're helping us to make islets less stressed and slow down the disease process. And that way you give us, the medical investigators, more time to find strategies to preserve the beta cells and stop the disease progression and hopefully reverse this. So this is teamwork with you and I, so that we are all in this together. And you're doing an amazing job already to get us to a stage that we can now also start to intervene. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much for that, Ron. I think this one aids up to what you just mentioned. I think this was in 2022 at ISPAD conference, like where you talked more about the approaches in the cancer treatment, and people were fascinated. So many questions came up, and we were even interested because it was our first time hearing about that. We want to learn from experience, from people that have walked the walk. There were so many things that you discussed about. So my question now, like during the ISPAD 2022, like you looked at the approaches for cancer treatment, and whether the lessons that were learned can be used for the treatment of type 1 diabetes. If you may kindly break down what you meant to the attention of our listeners and those that may be interested in the research also.
Well, it's relating to what we were discussing earlier, with all the different disciplines, all the different expertises that are required to understand the disease. Sometimes if you look at what our neighbors are doing, the people working in oncology and cancer therapy, you can learn things. Except for diabetes, what my message is, you have to turn those therapies 180 degrees, right? Because in cancer, you want to activate the immune system to kill the cancer. And in diabetes, you want to inactivate the immune system to make beta cells happy again and to preserve them. And the problem is that when you suppress the immune system in diabetes to slow down the disease, your risk of cancer goes up. So I'm a strong believer, just appreciating, respecting how fantastic the immune system is of people with type 1 diabetes. We should not suppress it. We should not bombard it into submission. We should negotiate with it. So one of the strategies that I have, let's say, borrowed from the cancer immunotherapy and used in diabetes, dendritic cell therapy, where we take immune cells of the patient, we treat them with vitamin D3 and our vaccine, and inject it back into patients. So that way, we're not suppressing the immune system, but we're educating the immune system how to do it right. Much what you do with allergies, right? If you know where the allergen to which you have allergic reaction, you can actually inject small doses repeatedly under your skin, and at some stage you become tolerant. That is what we try to do also in diabetes, not suppress it. Be sure that we take full advantage of a fantastic immune system, but just correct the one thing that is responsible for the destruction of beta cells. So that is one of those examples where you can take cancer therapies and switch it around. Would you like another one? Another example?
Yes,
Tino said yes, but he was muted, so I'll answer it for him. So another one is in cancer, what they also do is using therapeutic antibodies. There are antibody drug conjugates. So basically you put a backpack, a cargo of whatever you want on the antibodies. The antibodies go to your cancer, and then the backpack opens, and in cancer they put in a toxin that will destroy the cancer. In diabetes, we do it 180 degrees different. Instead of putting in a toxin, we put in a growth factor for beta cells to make beta cells happy again. So we have a drug against the inflammation, and in its backpack, it holds a cargo that makes beta cells happy. Now you create the perfect storm to cure diabetes, because you, on the one hand, stop the immune attack, and on the other hand, you make beta cells happy again. And both are required for a durable intervention in type 1 diabetes.
Thank you, Professor. This is so great. I think we'll need to follow up on these ones as well.
Be my guest.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So now that we missed you at this party, knowing that you are a person who lives in the Netherlands, the conference was in the Netherlands. I couldn't come to the Netherlands last minute, but I was supposed to be there, and I was hoping to see you there. I have a question on a topic that is of particular interest to your heart, something that is closest to your heart. It was talked about. There was a plenary session on what's up with the type 1 diabetes therapeutics. So like new approaches for an old disease, like diabetes is an old disease, right? So knowing your involvement with the One Egg Family Project to cure type 1 diabetes, what can you share with the audience? I know probably you might have already shared about this, but now that like there was something about this, like what can you share with us?
No, I did basically. Some of those examples that we have been able to develop thanks to a generous gift of the One Egg family were the inverse vaccination, right? To not activate it, but to inactivate the immune system. That was one example. The other one was the antibodies with the cargo. We also have been doing some fancy gene therapy in beta stem cells to make beta cells that we culture from those stem cells much happier and less likely to be stressed. So we try to make them invisible to the immune system. We want to implant stealth beta cells so that you don't need to give the recipients of those stem cells immune suppression, which I think is not going to be a good idea, because you need your immune system to avoid cancer and infection. But if we can make beta cells invisible, you don't need to give those drugs against rejection and disease recurrence. Those are all components of the One Egg Family Project. I, by the way, moved back from California, so that program has been completed for me, but it has planted a lot of seeds that are now developed into, some of them are tested in clinical trials already. Can you imagine that we started, and within 5 years we had 3 different clinical trials from scratch that we were developing, and that is because the One Egg family, like you and I, we have this sense of urgency. What they want to do is to accelerate progress, and that's exactly what we did. And it's now up to my successor, Alberto Pugliese, to find his ways of doing this. I'm back in Europe. I'm working very hard now on what we call regenerative medicine. How can we restore, revitalize, or replace beta cells without the immune system attacking them? So those are things that I'm spending much of my time on right now.
I think this question resonates on everything that you've shared about the immune system, that we still need our immune system. We cannot forgo the immune system, trying only to focus the beta cell. We know for other diseases, like when COVID-19 came, people said people with diabetes have got a weak immune system, so it will be difficult for them maybe to heal. So there are so many things. And now we talk of the other autoimmune conditions that can come to people living with diabetes. What can you say about this, the role of the immune system to people living with diabetes? Can we say that diabetes weakens the immune system, or the immune system is doing the possible thing that it's supposed to do? I don't know the correlation.
Maybe one way of answering that wonderful question, Tino, is that I think that the immune system of diabetes patients that is hyperactive, with as a price, a consequence that you sometimes get these autoimmune components. In case of an infection with COVID, that immune system is a blessing in disguise, because in the intensive care, we could see lots of people with type 2 diabetes that were dying, but type 1 diabetes was very, very rare. In other words, the immune system of a diabetic patient is more likely to cope with infection and more likely to cope with cancer, provided that you don't suppress it. So that's exactly part of my contention, that we should negotiate with the immune system, but not bombard it into submission, not suppress it. We need to cherish the immune system because it's doing more good than bad. Imagine with diabetes, it's only the beta cell. I know it's bad not to make insulin, don't get me wrong, but how much else could have gone wrong but doesn't go wrong, right? I mean, we should really be appreciative and respectful of our immune system, because it's doing a darn good job in getting rid of cancers, better so than the healthy population, right? I mean, it's quite remarkable.
We cannot thank you enough for all the insights. You're an immunologist yourself, and you understand more about the immune system because you've studied it and you've been working in it with the number of projects that you've been involved in. Now you're back in Europe doing so much great work. Yes, people understood, people knew that there are research being done, but also now trying to put the face on some of the people that are doing these things. It means a lot to us.
We accomplished this together, right? We know what we know thanks to people with diabetes, and listening to them and them telling us what they experience and what their unmet needs are, and reminding us of the sense of urgency. But also, and that's not trivial, I cannot tell you how grateful I am for the support that we get, just for us even spending time and devote our lives to cure diabetes. It's frustrating that I've been working on this for 30 years. I'm not done yet. That's terrible frustrating. But the gratitude that we get and the motivation from people with diabetes, their interest and unreserved, unconditional support and love for the things that we're doing, I mean, that is a real blessing that I'm incredibly grateful for. And that is also one of the reasons why I am delighted that you reached out to me and that we can again join forces and our mission to spread the news. It is teamwork. Every one of you and us is part of this. That makes this such a wonderful journey.
Indeed, we're in this together.
Yeah, we could not have done this without you, and that goes both directions, I'm sure.
Definitely, it does. Wow, thank you so much. You, as a renowned expert in the field of diabetes, with more than 350 original articles on your discoveries and several prestigious awards that you've received, with a number of honorable roles and appointments that you have, what can you share with the audience who aspires to be like you? Yes, I know they're junior doctors.
Well, I kind of gave it away, yeah. It's people like you, the patients with diabetes always ask me, do you have diabetes yourself or somebody? Because you're so motivated, you're so invigorated. I have to admit, no, I don't have it. But I've been so much motivated by the people with diabetes to do what we do that I now kind of owe it. I always, when I get emails of desperate patients or parents of patients that want me to cure them, I'm saying, listen, it's very difficult and I don't want to raise false expectations right now. But trust me, I will not rest until I can be of best service to you or your family. In other words, whenever I get this signal, I get a stronger sense of urgency and a stronger motivation to work even harder to deliver something that is meaningful. At some stage, it's kind of interesting. My daughter, she is now studying medicine, coincidentally, and I asked her to look at one of my presentations just from curiosity, and then she said, yeah, that's great, Dad. And I thought, oh, okay, what's missing, right? And she said, well, who is it? Who are you treating? And then people want to see a face with it. Or with football players, they need to see the numbers on their back and their name. So that's when I realized I have to give concrete examples. Who is this? This is this 14-year-old boy in Brazil that is now insulin independent thanks to this therapy. This 18-year-old girl in Denmark is actually completely in remission and not taking insulin anymore thanks to some of our discoveries. So, and although these are unfortunately still anecdotes, it's so important to realize that it's proof of principle. It can be done. If that one person is you or your loved one, it changes your life. So every patient matters. That is so important. And the fact that the patients turn out to be much more diverse than we were appreciating means that we have to find more different ways for different people at different times of their disease. But that is our task. But at least we can show that it can be done. And that is a very important message for those that have been diagnosed with diabetes and their doctor saying, I'm sorry, it cannot be cured. If we can change that and saying, well, I'm sorry, let's see how we can cure it and when, that will be my dream. Then I can retire.
Wow, this is so great. Because already it inspired your own daughter to join in the medical field, and now she's doing all this. Wow, thanks to you. And I wonder, like, there are also like so many amazing people that are going to listen to this that will also be inspired with everything, trying to have like this passion. Passion is always great because it will push you to the limits, even if you feel like you want to retire, but you feel you still need to correct some of the things before you do so. Yeah. So thank you.
All of you that have diabetes, please know that there is many people like me, many soulmates like you and I, that are working day and night to try to solve this. I'm quite fascinated. Some of my own team members have type 1 diabetes. And for me, that is the reality check. Because people with diabetes, they would only spend their time working with people where they believe you can make a difference. So I'm very honored to have those smart kids deciding to work with me to do this, because that reminds me I might actually be on the right way. Because people with diabetes, they're probably the most invested and critical and skeptic people to work on curing the disease. So the fact that they are in the team means that we might actually be onto something. And you always have to question, am I doing the right thing? Is this the way to do it? For me, the fact that these talented young people are joining us, and those are millennials, they could do anything they want in the world, right? And they still chose to work on this problem with us, means it might be something worthwhile. So let that be a glimmer of hope for all of us. There might be something out there.
We are hopeful. Thank you for soaring that hope, trying to focus on your career into finding. People could have just folded their hands to say, hey, we have the treatment. Now we have the therapies for people treating people with diabetes. What's there? Now trying to understand new things so that we can have a cure. I think that'll be so great. There's one conviction that I read from the university where you work. It says, if you want to help make the world a better place, you first have to understand this world. What does this conviction mean to you personally and professionally?
It is the story of my life, Tino, because when I was this young medical student, wet behind the ears, listening to the professor of endocrinology talk about how to treat the symptoms, and I put up my finger and I asked that, sir, how does it start? And he looked like stung by a bee. Then I knew that if you don't understand the world, if you don't understand what the disease is, how can you ever treat the cause? So for me, it was the change in my career that I decided that rather than coping with symptoms, I do it the hard way, starting to study from scratch, first understand what the root problem, and on base of that, build educated strategies for the right people at the right time. It's all about learning. That has led to where we are now. Yes, you have to understand the world around you. You also have to understand that the world around you is larger than you might think. So that's important that you look beyond your boundaries, and that you and I, we travel and we meet each other in Abu Dhabi and other fun places in the world and exchange experiences and motivate each other. Those are all parts of the same mission and same path, but also about understanding each other and our environments. So yeah, that's the story of my life.
Thank you for sharing part of your life with us, with the audience. Wow. So thank you. I think my last question to you what would be your words of advice for people living with diabetes, healthcare professionals, and also to the caregivers?
My advice is, well, first of all, to respect your immune system and don't blame your body for what you have. The second is that whatever I do, I always immediately ask, what does this mean? This result that we say, eureka, we have discovered something. But what does this mean to a person with diabetes right now? Because whatever we are planning to do may create hope, but the difference between hype and hope is but one letter, right? And I don't want this to be a hype. What you're doing every day in trying to do your stinking best to get your blood sugars right, that is the magic that beta cells need to become relaxed, to not be stressed, and to survive. That helps me and my colleagues around the world to find ways to protect the remaining beta cells, because it is unbelievable, right? That many of you, maybe even the majority of people with type 1 diabetes have beta cells. We just did a large study in England where we looked in urine, which is kind of the kitchen sink of everything you made all day. And we saw insulin, your own insulin, being made by patients that had disease for 3, 4, 5 decades, right? So it's there. Right now, so that means that, and it could only be there because you made sure that your immune system did not destroy it. So you are already doing a wonderful job. I hope that I can help you with that in the near future, but it is not something of the future. It is actually happening already right now. So be aware of that and be proud of yourself in what you have accomplished, because it is a daunting task to keep your blood sugars right. The better you do it, the more relaxed your beta cells will be, and the better chance that we can get them back in action. So keep up the good work, and thank you for all you have been doing to get where you are.
And there you have it, a captivating journey into the world of diabetes research with Professor Balshraaeb. Thank you so much, Professor. I've said this more than once to say thank you. That means a lot to us. I want to express my deepest gratitude, and not just my gratitude, but also on behalf of my colleague, Constantine Ataki, who is not here with us. We were supposed to do this together. So for sharing your expertise with us and your valuable insights with us today. It has been so great. And we believe that the entire global diabetes community would love to follow up on this. Have opened our minds greatly. If you have any questions or want to learn more about the topics discussed, feel free to reach out. So we can even follow up on Professor and you'll be able to answer them. So until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and thank you for joining the Global Diabetes Insights. Professor, we cannot thank you enough. I don't know if you have any last words apart from the words of advice that you've shared with us.
I would just say stay tuned and keep connected, and I'm sure that we can win this battle together.
Because we are stronger together. We are in this together. So yes, no one is better, because we need each other. We need to consult each other so that we can come up with the one solution, because this is for people with diabetes. But people with diabetes alone cannot win this battle. We need researchers, we need people working in diabetes so that we can come up with the solution. That is to cure people living with diabetes. Thank you.